July 4th, 1946, Gdansk, Poland. The trial had concluded 2 months ago in the very city where crowds from every neighborhood were gathering. Since the war's end nearly a year ago, the people of post-war Poland have been baying for justice. The Stutthof Concentration camp had left a murderous, dark stain all over the city of Gdansk. The Stutthof trials were the law's response. Some 11 overseers of the camp have been sentenced to death for their role at Stutthof. 5 of these overseers were women, and as a massive crowd of tens of thousands gathered to look at them up on the raised platform, they were here to watch them hang. The post-war efforts to correct the shocking atrocities of World War II were widespread and robust. Military tribunals were set up across Europe to bring justice to those who played a part in the atrocities of the Nazi campaign and the horrors of the Holocaust. But what of the women who were complicit in atrocity? The Nazi designs of the final solution had their own perverse, brutal tenets for bringing extermination to the female populations. Those overseeing the atrocities against women were women themselves, often young, often from desolate backgrounds, ready to join a national cause. Could they have possibly realized the irreversible destruction they would conduct on their paths? Nevertheless, as SS overseers of all female concentration camps, they would bring horror, murder, and unimaginable suffering to hundreds of thousands. When the war was over, the suffering was there to be had, and military tribunals were set up to assure it. Come with us as we take a look at the bleakest fates of the female concentration camp guards who made it out of the war alive. Welcome to History on Fleek. Elizabeth Becker. What is now called Nowy Stutthof in the northern reaches of Poland was once a complicated piece of geopolitical history. Following the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, the League of Nations created the city-state, the Free City of Danzig. This upstart polity was an overwhelming German-populated locale that would find itself a hotbed of fractious politics between the burgeoning Nazi politics and once Polish territory. It was here in the town of Gdansk in 1923 that Elizabeth Becker was born. Situated in an unwinnable geopolitical hotbed, the decade Elizabeth Becker came of age saw the majority of the city's Senate be occupied by Nazis. The voice of the Senate was loud and clear in its voice that the Free City should join Germany. Aged 13 in 1936, Becker would join the one female youth organization of the rising Nazi movement, the League of German Girls. Just 2 years later, Becker worked as both a tramway conductor and a cook across Danzig. In September 1939, the German forces would invade the Free City of Danzig, with the city being signed into law as German territory the same day. While the Polish military would hold out for another week and the Polish population within faced terrors, including the guillotine and sterilization from the Nazis, the German-born Becker faced no such persecution. Her Nazi youth associations carried her in a good light, with the growing Wehrmacht presence. Come 1940, with all territory once Polish under either Nazi or Russian occupation, Becker worked for the firm named Donkendorf in her native Nuttek for a year. Her life was looking no more out of the ordinary than many German-born citizens around occupied territories at the time. In 1941, for the following 3 years, Becker would be working for the land as an agriculture assistant in Danzig. It was toward the end of the war that fate would turn, and her life would change irreparably. As the German war effort began to collapse, the occupied territories would be called up for service. Elizabeth Becker was no exception. However, in 1944, Elizabeth Becker was not called to the front lines or to see combat. She was called up to be a guard at the Stutthof Concentration camp. September 5th, Elizabeth arrived at Stutthof and began training as an SS overseer. Here she would work at SK3, the Stutthof Women's Camp, firsthand selecting which women and children would be sent to the gas chambers. Just 4 months into her overseer role, Becker fled. One can only presume an ugly and overdue streak of conscience arrived, but the damage was done, and she would be arrested by Polish police just 3 months after her return to Nuttek. In May 1946, the Stutthof trial commenced in Danzig. 10 defendants and Becker were found guilty and were to be sentenced to death. Becker had tried to retract a statement confessing she had selected 30 prisoners to be gassed. A commuting of her sentence was recommended but not issued. Elizabeth's 4 months were viewed in the same eyes as any of the other defendants. At 22 years old, Elizabeth Becker was hung to death at a large gallows in Biskupia Gorka, Gdansk, in front of 200,000 people on the 4th of July. Irma Greza. Irma Greza presents a rare breed of Nazi participants, one that showed a pathological hunger for the Nazi ideology from the youngest of ages. Born in 1923, Gräse ironically showed no appetite for brutality or cruelty in childhood, for a girl who would go on to be known as the hyena of Auschwitz. Yet her teenage years in the Nazi-enveloped 1930s brought out a different side to Irma's personality makeup. It perhaps shouldn't be forgotten, Irma's home life also came apart quite spectacularly in the decade of the Nazi rise. Her mother would take her own life in 1936 by drinking hydrochloric acid after hearing of her husband's affair. Irma was only 13 at the time. During her teenage years, Irma was desperate to join the League of German Girls, but her father, despite being a party member himself, denied her and her sister's entry. Yet Irma would not be denied. Having left school at 15, she then left home before 17 to move to the SS Female Helpers Training Base. This was Irma Gräse's first step towards infamy. The Helpers Base was within reach of the all-female concentration camp Ravensbrück. Under the title of Aufseherin in 1940, Gräse would work at Ravensbrück. Irma Gräse's penchant for cruelty and desire for control was fully untethered at the Ravensbrück camp. Her coming trial would reveal her as one of the most loathed and menacing figures at the camp. Witnesses would declare they'd witnessed Irma Gräse dole out physical punishment till women could no longer stand. In March 1943, Gräse was transferred to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Her work as Aufseherin would cost Irma her relationship with her father, but her capacity for cruelty lived on. At Auschwitz-Belsen, Gräse would become accustomed to the brutal beatings of prisoners. Many camp guards would use sticks, truncheons, and their jackboots to beat prisoners. Irma had her very own custom whip made of cellophane. Labeled the Beautiful Beast of Belsen, Irma Gräse would make personal selections of who was sent to the gas chamber in the female camps she oversaw. In April 1945, during an evacuation transport from Auschwitz to Ravensbrück, Gräse was caught by the British Army. Conducted in Lüneburg, Irma Gräse was tried with 45 others during the Belsen trials. She was defiant to the end and supposed a narrative that she wanted to be a nurse and had protested her concentration camp position. Sentenced to death by hanging, Gräse would sing Nazi songs the night before her execution with fellow camp overseers. She was executed by hanging in 1948, and as a 22-year-old woman, was the youngest to die under the sentence of British law for the entire century. Maria Mandl. Another who would come to face trial for their reprehensible actions overseeing concentration camps was Maria Mandl, born in Munchkirchen, then Austria-Hungary, in 1912. Few figures are attributed a more chillingly significant role in the Holocaust. As an SS Helferin, the euphemistic term of helper, Mandl is considered to have had a significant role in as many as 500,000 deaths of female prisoners. In a perverse professional climb, Mandl joined the Lichtenberg camp in Saxony, working alongside fellow SS women in 1938. The opening of Ravensbrück gave Mandl the climb she desired, and she was sent to work as a guard in the camp in May 1939. Her brutality and efficiency were well reviewed by the superiors of the camp, and she officially joined the Nazi Party on April 1, 1941. A year later, Mandl's professional climb was complete, as she was promoted to SS Oberaufseherin in 1942. She was no longer an overseer of a concentration camp, she was the head overseer. In such a high position of authority, Mandl would be in charge of daily roll calls, but assigned tasks to fellow overseers, including their abuse of prisoners. Maria Mandl's rotten authority only expanded as the war went on. October 1942 was the point in time Mandl was sent to Auschwitz II, Birkenau, and was given the role that would give her total control over female overseers and prisoners, SS Lagerführerin. From signing intimate orders that would send hundreds of thousands to their death in the gas chambers and medical experiments, to tearing infants from their mothers' arms upon the arrival at the camps, few exhibited more profound inhumanity than Mandl. It was said that she would wait at the entrance gate to Birkenau, and if a prisoner directly looked at her, they would never see again. Mandl would be responsible for promoting Irma Gräse at Birkenau. Hate breeding hate, it could be said. This grand overseer of female suffering would meet her fate fleeing Germany after the war. Returning to Munchkirchen, she was arrested by the United States Army in August of 1945, but following their request for it, she was handed over to Polish authorities a year later. In November 1947, she was found guilty of war crimes and those against humanity, and she was sentenced to death. In Krakow in 1948, Mandl was hung to death. Elizabeth Volkenrath. A fellow Belsen trials defendant, Elizabeth Volkenrath, would go on to commit atrocities of such extent they would amount to war crime convictions. She would also be another who faced her justice at a remarkably young age, just 26. At the trial, she would attest to striking concentration camp prisoners, but deny using more than her hand. She would also speak of witnessing fellow female camp guards receiving lashes of the whip for insubordinate behavior, including affairs with male prisoners. In the majority, Volkenrath's testimony was full of denial and an entirely self-neglecting account. Many eyewitnesses spoke of Volkenrath beating female prisoners with a club, which she vehemently struck down as a lie. What is known for sure is Volkenrath volunteered for the start of her engagements with concentration camps. Her ascent was similar to the scenes of Irma Gresa and Maria Mandl. She started work at Ravensbrück in 1941, and by 1942 she found herself working as an overseer in Auschwitz-Birkenau. It would only be at the tail end of the war in February 1945 that Volkenrath found herself Oberaufseherin at Bergen-Belsen. Despite her denials, Volkenrath had numerous eyewitness testimonies against her. The company she found herself among, Mandl, Gresa, and the Aufseherin, meant she was rightfully sentenced to death at Belsen trials. Her execution was by hanging, much like Irma Gresa, and even more so at the very same prison on December 13, 1945. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.